Hi, my name is Maggie Gates. Today we're going to talk about Fireline, the final book in the Griffith Brothers Ranch series. Fireline re-releases in North American bookstores on March 3rd, and I cannot wait to dive into CJ and Lennon's story.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books, where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author Maggie Gates. Today we're heading back to the Griffith Brothers Ranch to talk about Fireline, the explosive, heart-wrenching finale to the Griffith Brothers series, which is now back on shelves with a brand new cover and 2 new bonus chapters. In our discussion today, Maggie and I will get into enemies to lovers sparks, the reality of trying to build a life when you're under-resourced, and what it means to draw a fire line in your own life to cut out the patterns that kept you in survival mode so you can actually feel safe, loved, and at home wherever you are. If you've ever struggled to accept help, felt as if you didn't deserve love, or found yourself wondering when the other shoe is going to drop, this conversation and book are both for you. Maggie, welcome back to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited, and I cannot wait to talk about Fireline.
Oh, yeah, I really wanted to dive into this book with you. And even in my email, I said I could talk to you about this book for 3 hours. We are not going to do that today. We will try to kind of condense it a bit, but there was a reason why, right? I picked up this book in this series that I absolutely love. Every one of the books has moved me. But this book in particular was hitting on some really big themes that I'm sure resonated with the audience, but resonated with me as well. So before we kind of explore them, can you share just a little overview of the book and your 2 main characters?
Absolutely. So, Fireline is the final book in the Griffith Brothers series. It is romantic suspense, it's enemies to lovers, it's workplace romance, and it follows the story of CJ Griffith, who is the youngest of the Griffith brothers, and Lennon Maddox, who is an up and coming chef with a little bit of a past. They have this very fiery one night stand, go their separate ways, and then a few days later, they realize that they're working on the same ranch, and she holds a position that he is not happy even exists. And so he does not want her on the land. He does not deal with change well, and she represents all of that. And so that just leads them into this very um spicy, fiery, high tension enemies dynamic. It's a little bit of a workplace feud. And so there's tons of banter, tons of spice, lots of feelings and emotions. And then it all comes together when she opens up about what she's been through.
I love that intro, and you touched on so many things. So let's just try to dive in and unpack all of them. It's like, where do you even start first? But one of the things that came up for me is that this is a story where the intimacy happens right off the bat, right? They have a one night stand. They don't know anything about each other, instantly attracted, and then this happens, and then everything else develops. So tell us a little bit about writing that, where you've had that physical intimacy, but then, oh my God, the excruciating journey of getting to know someone and getting to know yourself in the process that happens afterwards.
I think if I could boil this book down into one word, it's perception. Everything from the way that they initially meet at the bar, and they have this perception of each other where she's a little rough around the edges and she looks at him like he's this buttoned up cowboy, and then that perception changes when they realize that they have some real chemistry right off the bat, and they indulge and let off some steam, and then that perception changes when you continually see the same person through a different lens of now we're in a workplace together. And so I think writing enemies to lovers is always a little difficult for me because I either floor it and I take things way too far, or it's not quite enough. And I think with Fireline, I was proud of myself for hitting that balance of banter and real stakes and, real hurt that they have both individually and from each other that they have to work through. And so I think once they finally let their guard down and they have an honest conversation, which is something that they don't do from the beginning, then you really see how much they do have in common.
Well, I love that you touched on the word perception because it comes up in many different areas in the book. And the one main one that stood out to me was the distorted perception that people experience when they are under resourced, when they don't have a stable foundation, when they don't have a community around them. And for them, it changes how they see themselves, how they see the world, how they see relationships, everything. And so we have this incredible character. And I loved Lennon as an FMC. And I feel like you probably heard me on the podcast this week. I was like, I love how Maggie rates women, but she's an incredible FMC. And part of it is that I think so many people who read the book related to her, related to that experience of being under resourced and not feeling like you had your people, like you didn't have anyone who had your back. And then you're just supposed to move through the world the same as everyone else. And you're having a very different experience. So, can we touch on that a little bit? Because it's kind of confronting for her in the book and for us in the real world when all of a sudden you're in a place where there's comfort, there's safety, all of your needs are met, you've got a great job, you're in charge, you have a home, like all of these things. And it's not as easy an adjustment as one might imagine.
I think for me, when I went into writing her character and her story in particular, there was an analogy that really stood out. And I'm sure many of the people who are listening have seen this video or heard the analogy, and it's where everyone lines up on a starting line and they say, okay, now if you come from this demographic, take 2 steps back. Okay, now if you're a child of divorce, take a step back. If you were unhoused, take a step back. And so you start to see how much further people have to go just to get back to the starting line where everybody else is, and what privilege it is to just start on the starting line. And so when you look at Lennon's character, you see her initially as a really talented chef. She is the head of a new restaurant under a celebrity restaurateur. And, she has opportunities laid out for her. But when you look at everything that she's been through, she's still back here and the starting line is up here and she has to work that much harder. And so I think it's an interesting conversation on being under resourced and what that actually looks like. Because, like you said, she has a great job, but she also has a criminal history. And so she, can't pass a background check that would allow her to get stable housing. That can affect her credit score, which affects her, ability to get all of these normal things that we need on a day to day basis. And what I really loved writing was the reality of that, where it's like, yeah, you've got a job, but that's not all that you need. And then you see the Griffith family come in, and it was a very subtle moment where Cassandra is meeting with Lennon in her office, and she goes, "We have resources. If you need them, they're here for you. Like, let me help you." And, we see Cassandra in book 1, and what a change she's had, a character arc throughout the whole series. And now she is taking her fierce personality and using it to help set somebody up for success. And I always approach books as I write the world that I want to see. And obviously I would love for people to not have struggles, but that's not reality. But what I do want to write and what I do want to see in the world is mutual aid, people using their resources and connections to help others. Because I think that when readers look at that, they go, oh, well, I have resources that I can use to help others. And, we're having fun and it's fiction and it's sexy and all of these things, but there's so much truth and reality to it. And so I hope readers really pick up on that.
And what an important topic, even today, as you and I are talking, just the idea of mutual aid and doing something where you are with what you have and what you can do in this moment. I feel like that's a really powerful message because a lot of us can feel very ineffective to create change in the world or in our communities or even with ourselves, right? Like we can struggle with that. So I do think that that's an important message. And I think that that scene in particular that you just mentioned was important because I think it hits with a lot of people for a reason because anyone who's been under-resourced, even when it's put in front of you, you would think you can just scoop it up and run with it and be like, "Oh my god, this is amazing. Everything's great. I've been handed." That is not how it feels. It can feel shaming. It can feel like you don't want to come across as needing it. It can feel like there might be strings attached, or if I take this, it'll just be taken away from me. So, it's those little scenes, not even between the main love interests, but, like, it's those scenes in this ecosystem that is coming together and can support her that she's very much a part of. Like, she's crucial to them succeeding as well. It just there's such a challenge there. And I love that you touched on it because for anyone who's experienced that, it's those scenes that really make you feel seen and heard. Like, it's not just me and my crazy head and I'm not allowing nice things to happen to me. It's like this is a process people go through.
I think everyone can either put themselves in Cassandra's shoes or in Lennon's shoes. Sometimes I know for myself as well, I've been in both, where I've been in Lennon's shoes where I needed help and I needed that aid. And I've also been in Cassandra's shoes where I'm incredibly privileged and I'm going to use those resources. And like you touched on, a lot of times there's shame around it, there's a stigma around it, there's this idea that there's strings attached. And it comes back to this idea of trust. And what I really loved seeing in Lennon's growth throughout the whole story is the way that she comes to trust not only CJ and they fall in love and have this great romance, but she comes to trust Cassandra. She trusts the Griffiths family, that there are no strings. And I think what's important to recognize is that Cassandra's approach never changes. She makes sure that Lennon knows when you need help, I'm here and you can come to me. And that's that. It's never pushy. It's never, oh, why don't you want this help? Why don't you want resources? Why don't you want me to step in? And I think what is a constant reminder for me is that continue to extend help, continue to extend grace when people may not accept it. Because, logic says, well, if you need help, accept it. But there's so much more that goes into it, when you're going through the trauma responses and things like that from what has led you to that point. And so I hope that people will put themselves in, one of those two characters' shoes and know that there's help out there and it's okay to take it. And there are people who really do genuinely care about you. And then if you're on the other side, to keep extending it, even if it's turned away, make sure people know that you're approachable.
That is such a good lesson and message, and I'm really glad we're talking about it because, yes, I feel like we can always say, "Oh, it's a book, it's fiction," but it's also how we live our lives, and a lot of our inspiration, options, opportunities kinda come through in these pages too, just as they would in any other format. So I love that we're talking about this and that you mentioned the word trust because that's a really big deal in this story, and anytime I think of the word trust, I also think of the word fear. And there was also a lot of fear between our main characters, right? CJ, the life he's known, it's transforming before his eyes. There's a lot of fear that something's being taken away from him. And I think Lennon has a lot of fear in many different areas of her life, whether it comes to relationships, but also she was incarcerated. There's layers of trauma and fear involved in that. And so whenever I look at fear, I look at it in three different ways. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid I won't get enough. I don't have enough. Or I'm afraid that you're going to take something away from me and it cannot be replaced. And each of those kind of kicks up our trauma responses. And it can almost be, I wouldn't say uncontrollable, but it's not always conscious, right? We can get really reactive in those states of mind. And then thinking about fear in the context of being afraid of the good. And I felt like that was a theme throughout this book. And I just want to touch on that with you for a moment because we can overlook that. You could have overlooked it in writing this book, but it's really relatable. And we learn a lot when we read our favorite characters going through this. Being afraid of the good and feeling like I don't deserve it. It's going to be taken away from me. I can't hold it, or it means something else. So, can you drop into that space with us? And I threw a lot at you, but fear and how it showed up in your story.
I love this topic because the book that I'm actually writing right now is all about that. There's a line I was working on yesterday where she was like, I think I'm afraid to let myself be happy because I've been through all of this stuff and I'm so used to it being taken away. At some point, everyone lets me down, the other shoe drops, and it just goes away. So why would I let myself be happy even for a time? And when I look at CJ and Lennon, like you said, they both have to confront fear in their own separate ways. I think for CJ, he looks at it, like you said, as everything I've ever known is changing. This land that I love is changing, and there's other people here now, and it doesn't look the same. And I had to give something up that was really important and valuable to me. And when you look at Lennon, it's just the fear that the other shoe is going to drop. She was part of a crime that she did not want to commit. She was incarcerated for some of the most formidable years of her life. And then, she's constantly looking over her shoulder now that she's out, waiting for the boogeyman to jump out at her. And it's an exhausting way to live. And so I think when you're confronted with this idea of, it's like what Cassandra called it in book one. She called it like the sitcom life, where it's like this, this idyllic little ranch. And when you're confronted with what seems to be too good to be true, I think a lot of people's natural reaction is to push away and be like, nope, 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 that's not for me. I'm not going to have anything to do with it, rather than to take that chance and to trust and to make the jump. And so I loved seeing both of them work through those fears in different ways at different paces. And every step of the way, they both had people there, whether it was each other, whether it was their family, their coworkers, like Lennon's relationship with her boss, Luca. They all had people surrounding them who weren't pushing them to make the jump and just go for it and be okay, but that they were with them every step of the way.
And I think it really highlights the importance of all of those relationships. Like you're pointing out, you're not just focusing on the primary intimate partnerships. You're also saying, like, this love and support is in your life, but we might not always recognize it or feel it. And it might not be as loud as the harmful relationships were, but there's a more solid foundation to these relationships. And it's interesting because you brought up these really important years in Lennon's life. She's spending them in a very isolating and fearful environment, and it's changing her life, and she's not having those experiences as a young person, but she was also put there by someone she trusted, or maybe not even trusted, but like your closest relationship. So what impact does that have on the rest of your relationships, your desire for closeness, your desire for anything deeper than surface level? And it's really hard to get there. And so I think I just really appreciated in this book that the process was a little choppy. It was difficult. And I'm thinking of, right, the title of the book is Fireline. I'm thinking of fire, alchemy, transformation. It's not always easy. And I'm thinking of those really critical, intimate moments when she and CJ are having those revealing conversations, and it feels painful. It's delicious to read because you're really empathizing with her and what she's going through, but you're seeing the struggle. And so when you're touching on developing the foundation of these relationships with people, when you've never had these positive experiences, I don't know, what were you thinking when you were thinking about her relationship with Steve, like how they could get there? Because she'd never really had it, right? Like she just didn't have that closeness, that safety.
When I was working on the title of the book, I always title my books before I write them because I like using thematic elements of fire and smoke and ash and all of these things. And you see that kind of work throughout the book. But I always try to sneak the title into the book somewhere. And it's a fun little Easter egg hunt for me. I don't know if readers get as much of a kick out of it as I do, but I'm always like,
We
oh,
do.
look, there
We
it is.
do.
Um, but with this one, I love the title tie-in because they are discussing what a fire line is. And it's when there's a wildfire or an out of control blaze and you have to cut out a portion of the earth and dig it out, which is exhausting and painful and backbreaking. And there's this fire that's coming at you that's dangerous, but you have to get rid of something to stop the blaze. And for both CJ and Lennon, they realize that their common toxic trait is their pride. And I think a lot of times we use pride as a defense mechanism to deal with the fear and the lack of trust. And, going back to our conversation about lack of resources, where, sometimes you can have that mentality of, what, I'm good. I don't need this. I've got it. I can take care of myself because it's scary to trust people. And so, yes, fear is so formidable, but so is your pride because that can keep you from trusting people, from loving them, from falling in love, from getting the help that you need. And so I love this idea of we have to sacrifice the thing that makes us feel safe in order to actually be safe and to stop this pattern of destruction. And I think, they had to do that in different ways. Lennon had to learn to accept help. She had to learn to trust people. And CJ had to learn to let go of this ideal life that he had pictured in his head. I think he had to truly let himself grieve that and move on in the same way that Lennon had to let herself be upset and be angry about what had happened to her previously so that she could really start to work through it. Because I think for her, for so long, she had just been in survival mode where you're not going to think too hard on it. You're not going to, let yourself be sad or upset about it. It's just about the next 5 minutes. And so I think, seeing the parallels in their personal journeys really helped them form this romantic bond and this really deep connection.
Yeah. Oh, I really felt that in this story. And I'm not giving anything away. We are aware this is a happily ever after. And I will say that one of my favorite scenes in the book came towards the end. And it was a scene where Lennon is telling CJ basically, like, thank you for loving me, even though I don't feel like I deserve it. And, the word deserve is a tricky one, but it's really vulnerable and raw in that moment. She's having a lot of emotions, which she only feels safe with him. And that's how they're allowed to come out. And instead of I thought it was beautiful, the back and forth that happens, because he's not fighting her on her distorted perception about it. He's just reinforcing that, you know what? Bad things happen to good people. Like, life happens to people, and what happened to you is also not who you are. And I feel like that's a really important message in this story. And for so many women, right, who read the book, who've been through things, what happens to you is not who you are is a really important message. And I just love that that's sort of what comes to the surface at the end of their journey in the book, when she does trust him and does feel safe with him and does feel like she's in partnership with him. And I just want to touch on that concept of what we feel we deserve. And I know that that's another heavy topic that I'm just throwing at you, but you're writing these incredible women characters, right? Whether it's Lennon or someone else. And I feel like that probably comes up a lot of, like, do I deserve this? Yeah. So what do you think about that?
There's this moment towards the end of the book where CJ uses love as a term of endearment. And I forget what he says, but he's like, okay, love. The way he would say baby or darling or sweetheart or something like that. And it's written from her point of view where she is taken aback by that. And she goes, "No one has ever called me love. No one has ever seen it in me. They've never expected it from me. They've always seen me as an ex-con. They've always seen me as the bad girl, as the tough girl. No one has ever expected love." And I think, like you said, what you've been through is not who you are. You get to define that. And I think, something I'm trying to do as a reader is decentralize myself from the reading experience where I'm not the main character. And so I think, sitting on the sidelines of this story, what I would take away from that, what I hope people take away from that, is to treat people like you expect love from them. Because I think when we do that, you're going to change relationships. You're going to change the way that you interact with strangers because you're not approaching somebody as if you expect to be hurt or if you expect to not trust them because we pick up on that. If you treat somebody as if you expect love from them, that changes the way that they feel that you perceive them. We all go through the world going, "Oh, do they think I'm mean? Do they think I have an RBF? I know I have an RBF, but um, but I think if we expected love from each other, I think the world would be a different place. And in today's current climate, there are not a lot of people that we expect love from in a proactive sense. And I think that if we did, it would be a lot different. And bringing it back to Lennon and CJ, that was my soapbox for a little bit, but bringing it back to Lennon and CJ, I think that that changed everything for her because CJ and the entire Griffith family didn't look at her as if she was this bad girl with a past. They saw her for who she was and what she did, the words that came out of her mouth. And they saw her as somebody who was tough, who was strong, who was trustworthy, who had a, incredible work ethic, someone who was level-headed and very smart. And they expected love from her. And being treated like that when everyone else has expected the opposite changes the way that you perceive the world. And I think those small moments really broke down her walls and allowed her to begin to trust and to let go of that fear. And going back to what we talked about at the very beginning, perception, it didn't just change CJ's perception of her, it changed her perception of herself.
Oh, such a powerful message. And I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through that because, I think sometimes we forget that in those moments of like, oh, I'm bringing all my stuff to this too. Like, I can enter into any situation or relationship with my distorted perception. And I really like that invitation you gave for the listeners and the readers, sort of approaching people with that in mind. So I'll probably be thinking about that all day, but I'm not going to do that right now. So the next thing I wanted to touch on was another bit of imagery from the book, and it was the burned piece of wood from the lodge that they put sort of in the floor, the threshold of their home. I'm probably not saying it the right way, but they put that there in their home as almost a fire line and a declaration of what their relationship is and what this home means. And what I loved about that was it was like that invitation into awareness that every time we step foot across this threshold, we are on each other's side. This is a safe place. Like you can crumble here, you can come to me here, I can support you here. And I love that. The consciousness that they were bringing into that relationship. And like, yes, they have all of the romance. And I'm so sorry we haven't touched on that at this point, but like, there's all the spice, there's all the romance, but there's also this, which is a strong foundation for all of those other things. It's really hard to connect with someone when you feel unsafe or you feel attacked. And so that imagery in the book and that awareness in their relationship or that commitment to it just meant so much, I guess, as a reader. And I wanted to share that and just ask you when you're writing that, that is powerful imagery. And what do you think about creating that in relationships? Like that commitment, that foundation, that awareness of, oh, we're always doing this together. Even when I feel like you're my adversary, you're on my side.
That came out of something that my husband and I established very early on in our relationship, which is no matter what, we are on the same team. We can be so mad at each other and be at each other's throats at home, but when we're around other people, we're on the same team. We're not going to talk badly about each other. I can be so mad at him, he can be so mad at me, and it is not going to be something where we're making little snippy comments or sitting around the dinner table with extended family and telling potentially embarrassing stories about each other. It was just something that I didn't realize that we needed until, we're 10 years into marriage now. And establishing that from the get go of we're on the same side. You're my teammate in this. And so, when I'm having a bad day, you're here to pick me up. When you're having a bad day, I'm here to get you. And I look at CJ and Lennon the same way. And I loved bringing that little chip of wood that he kind of has, I think, in chapter 2, back around to the end of the story because I love imagery and these, random items that have so much significance. But I love that visual, like you said, that visual reminder of when you cross this line, it doesn't matter what's going on out there. You're safe in here. We're on the same team. And I think that it's kind of a funny conversation to have sometimes because I've seen it in readers' faces online where they're like, but couples I think would get divorced.
Yeah.
And sometimes it makes me laugh because I think about some of my couples in my backlist and I'm like, yeah, they might get divorced. And so that conversation was something that I've taken with me into my writing of like, but would they? Would they make it? And I truly believe that CJ and Lennon would make it because that little piece put into their new home is a symbol of everything that they've been through, everything that brought them together, and everything that they gave up to be each other's partner. And I think when you have that constant reminder of what this relationship means to you, and it means trust, and it means protection, and it means safety, and it means everything that you haven't had before, those are the things that you're going to hold on to. And so when the bad times come, no one's saying it's going to be perfect after the epilogue. You have that reminder of this is my partner. And if my 2 cents matters, I think CJ and Lennon made it.
I think they made it too, especially hearing you speak about it like this. And I think also just from personal experience, it's really strange how some of the most challenging times in life, when you experience them as a couple, it doesn't feel the way you thought it would feel. Um, I think in my head, when I was much younger, I probably always assumed I would feel as isolated as I did as a young person dealing with these things, or I would be embarrassed to go through something with someone. I feel it's all my own stuff that I'm sharing here, but like going through something in front of someone. I mean, the horror of dealing with that. And then when you have that experience of the inevitability of things going awry in your life, and like it all happens to, I don't care how good you are or how you try to protect yourself, stuff will happen. And having that partner with you and truly having the experience of them being on your side, which almost might not be revealed to you if there weren't those challenging circumstances. You're seeing them differently. We've talked about change of perception throughout this whole episode, and I've witnessed my partner be a literal superhero in moments when I would not have known that, and I'm sure he's seen the same in me, and so I love thinking about the 2 of them having that foundation and carrying that with them through life, and I just thought it was such a beautiful part of the story, and I'm really glad we talked about it.
I love that you use the word embarrassment because, like you said, when you're in the long-term relationship with somebody, you kind of think like, oh, I've always handled this stuff by myself. What will it be like handling it with a partner? And one of my favorite scenes to write was actually the very end. I don't think it's a spoiler. We're very open that this is romantic suspense. There's a bad guy lurking out there and bad things happen. At the very end of the book, when Lennon is recovering, CJ comes in from work. She's hanging out at the main ranch house, and she has a drainage tube from her injuries. And he has to help her get up and go to the bathroom. He has to help her change clothes. It is a very humbling experience. Um, and I believe Lennon actually, it's written from her POV, and she's actually like, this is humbling, but it's this service that we do for each other, where we serve each other, and it doesn't have to be embarrassing because that's your teammate. They want you to succeed. They're on your side, and they love you no matter what. And I can think of, in my own relationship, all of these circumstances that my husband and I had been through where, I don't know, 15 years ago, I'd been like, absolutely not. I am not crossing that path with somebody else. I'm just fine on my own. Thank you. And then when you actually walk through it with somebody who you know that you can absolutely trust, what a world of difference that is. And what a connection that is. And you really feel your relationship deepen and grow in those moments.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this because it's really not about avoiding life or running from it, which is also a theme in the book, right? Like running from your past. It's about sort of like walking together through the journey. And I appreciate what you shared. It definitely resonated with me. I was thinking of something else, though, too, that comes up a lot. I used to run support groups. And so in our minds, we think everyone shows up to the support group and they're so happy to be there and they're so ready to talk about things and everyone's so well behaved. Plot twist that literally never happens. No one wants to be there. Everyone's uncomfortable, and I think I love talking about that. I'm not making fun of anyone. I'm actually just observing the human experience. But one thing that would come up a lot, and I experienced it myself when I was a participant, not a facilitator, is share shame. And I thought it was really interesting in this book as well, those moments when people are revealing parts of themselves. And shame is doing push-ups outside the front door, just like waiting to get at you, because that is something that you've carried with you throughout your whole life. And I don't know, I'm just thinking about the almost like the liberation from it when someone can see you in those moments when you are most vulnerable, when you are your most authentic self. And it's not what we want to show the world. And you are released from that shame, and just how transformative that experience can be in romantic partnerships, in fiction, just reading about it. And I was thinking about those moments when Lennon felt safe enough to open up with CJ. And I was thinking that might be the first time someone experiences that. And it's through a story because they've never experienced that in their own lives, and how healing that is. And it's like almost modeling for us, like that is possible. It's not possible with everyone, but it's out there. So I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to mention that because I just thought it was such a beautiful part of the book. Like, yes, there's the intimacy and the spice and the romance, but then there's also those moments where they feel completely connected and seen and vulnerable, and it's beautiful.
One of my favorite quotes, and I wish I knew who to attribute it to, is shame is a terrible motivator. And when you look at the opposite of that, which is acceptance, how much further you can go because you're not holding yourself back. And I think, dreaming up where CJ and Lennon would be in 20, 30 years, when you are no longer held back by shame or trying to motivate yourself with shame, saying, I can do it by myself. I don't want anyone else to see this messy side of me. When you allow yourself to have a partner, whether that's romantic or platonic or familial or, whatever, how much further you can go with love and support versus trying to motivate with shame.
Yeah. Such an important message. Well, Maggie, I also want to touch on the fact that this book is being re-released, which is also why we are talking about this. So can you give us a few details about that? And then I'd love to touch on something I noticed in the bonus scenes.
So, Fireline is the last book in the series, and it is the last book to be re released by Berkeley Publishing in North America, that's US and Canada. It will be out on March 3rd in bookstores near you everywhere with a brand new cover and two new bonus chapters that are just in the paperback. They're not in the audiobook, they're not in the ebook. So, this is the only place to find them. And I'll be traveling for this release, so I'll get to hang out and continue to yap about CJ and Lennon, which I could do until somebody tells me to shut up. but I will be in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Nashville, Tennessee, and Goldsboro, North Carolina. All those details can be found on my website at maggiegates.com/events. And I'm so excited to wrap up the series with this story and for more people to grab it and experience this because I think that this book has it all. It is packed with spice and, all the fun cowboy vibes that we like in cowboy romance. It's got the romantic suspense element. And like we've talked about this whole time, all of the character growth. And I'm gonna get a little emotional on March 3rd when I see it in stores and, when it's over, because it has just been so much fun revisiting these characters over the last couple months, and I'm really excited for everyone to read the new bonus chapters.
Oh, that's incredible. And I've loved watching you have this experience. So I'm thinking about this re release and you revisiting these stories in this way. What is something you can tell us about your experience with that? Like, did it make you see them differently, see yourself differently? Like, what was your experience in this journey?
For Fireline, it was incredibly redemptive. I've talked about this a little bit, but I originally released this series indie. It was self-published, and I released the entire series in 2024. After Downpour came out, which was May of 2024, my life turned upside down. I was dealing with some legal issues that I won't get too much into it with some of my books. And so I'm supposed to be celebrating that Downpour has come out and it hit top 100 on the Amazon charts, which I had never done before. And it was the best release of my entire career. And I was absolutely miserable because I'm on Zoom calls with lawyers all the time. I'm like angry and all of that. And then we started getting emails from some publishers who were like, "We like what you got. Let's talk." And so writing Fireline was probably one of the most difficult books I've ever had to write because life was just bananas. I was having panic attacks 2 or 3 times a day, and it was just the most chaotic season of life. And when Fireline came out that September, I did not celebrate the entire day because my agent and I were going back and forth. We knew that we were waiting on some offers from publishers to come in, and I was just like waiting on bated breath. And then it came in a couple days late, and I did not let myself celebrate. And so having these re releases has been so redemptive for me because I've just been able to sit back. I'm already comfortable with the books. They've already, done what they're going to do on the charts. And now I just get to celebrate it. And so I feel very grateful that we made it through that really hectic season of life and it's over. And I'm so glad for that. But that I got the second chance to really celebrate it. And so I'm really excited to go out on the road and visit some bookstores and meet with readers and talk about the book even more because it just feels like I get to do a victory lap with this one.
Oh, I love that for you. And thank you so much for sharing that because I did not know any of that was going on in the background. I'm sure a lot of people were not aware. We just sort of see the thing we love, right? Like, and we have no idea what's going on under the surface. And I think it's really beautiful that you've been able to have that almost redemptive experience of, oh no, it's re releasing. I get to have this again. So, one, thank you for sharing that. But then I also want to tie that in to something I was reading in the bonus scenes. And without giving too much away, it was about sort of like the transformative, powerful experience of allowing yourself to feel joy and the importance of that, and how sometimes it's not our baseline. And that's okay to say. Like, I'm not someone who pathologizes people who are going through things. It's probably me describing myself of like, I'm not easily accessing joy on a daily basis. For some of us, we have to cultivate that because there's so many layers and things tied into it. Like, I don't want my joy to be too loud because what will someone say or do? I don't want to enjoy it too much because I'm tempting the gods with hubris and then they'll take it away from me. And so it made me think of this one thing my friend Dan told me many, many years ago. He was like, "Listen, I'm not giving you a hard time about your first thoughts. Your first thoughts are not good." But he's like, "You are responsible for your second thought. And that's where I want you to do the work because you're beating yourself up for your first thought, which is not joy. It's not abundance. It's not all of these things." He's like, "You never knew those things. So why would you immediately think about them? But I want you to work on cultivating your second thought." And I was really hearing that in the bonus chapters, and I was just, oh, just it just hit, I guess. And I'm not giving scenes away or anything like that, but I also liked that, we're in the happily ever after phase, right? Where life is good and you're given those different challenges of stepping up to receive the joy that's all around you. And how for some of us, it can be surrounding us and we still can't feel it. And so this was an invitation to take a look at yourself and say like, "Oh, it's on me also to work on this and then welcome this into my life." So thank you, Maggie, one, for putting that in the book because I think it hit with a lot of people like me. And then I would love to hear about that, especially given your experience where you're saying you've had this redemptive experience of being joyful about these releases.
I absolutely loved writing all of the bonus chapters. Each book has two. I approached each book differently because I wanted to look at what does life look like after the epilogue. With romance books, you're guaranteed that happily ever after. And so sometimes I think we think all of the problems end at the end of the story. And so for each couple, I wanted to approach it a little bit differently of, what does their happily ever look like? So with CJ and Lennon, I wanted to approach this idea that things aren't perfect just because you find your person. You don't just magically get over everything. And it's okay to take the days as they come. And in the bonus chapters, I'll spoil it a little bit. Nate and Lennon have this heart to heart. And I love that because I see them as unlikely friends. And I think if readers have read Nate's book, which is called The Stars Above Us, it's a standalone, you'll see that they do have a lot in common. And they both look at life as not necessarily that the glass is half full or that the glass is half empty, but the glass is there. There is this much water in it. And at some point, it might get lower. And recognizing that you don't always have to wait for the other shoe to drop, but it's, give yourself grace. It's okay to know bad things are going to come eventually. That's just the way that life is. But to take the small joys as they come and to not feel guilty over indulging in them, but to not beat yourself up when you don't feel it. Because, I think we've all had those moments where you're like, I thought life would be different after 25. I thought I would have everything together at 30. I thought, you know, whatever, insert yourself in that moment. I thought life would be perfect once I had a stable job and I had a partner and I was in a stable house and all of these previous struggles were taken care of. And you recognize that sometimes you are just in your head and that's okay. Sometimes things do happen that upset you and that just because the struggles you have now aren't the struggles you had before, aren't as bad as the struggles you had before, doesn't make them less valid. Take the days as they come. Indulge in the small joys. Try something new. The setting of the bonus chapters in Fireline is a little funny to me because I just imagine them causing absolute havoc as all the
Yeah.
siblings are together. But Lennon allowing herself to experience something new, to go somewhere new, where she had previously been like, you know what, this is my safe little bubble on the ranch. Everything is good here. Nothing can touch me. But to really live, I need to step outside of that comfort zone again. I had a blast writing them and, kind of giving them their own little victory lap of where they are now and, giving them a little spicy moment. It was, it felt redemptive for those characters just as much as it was redemptive for me.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me about the bonus chapter was the setting because one of the experiences of trauma and PTSD that doesn't often get spoken about. So I'm just going to talk about it here. And not everyone might relate, but I will say, as a connoisseur of it, this is something that rises to the surface. It's the rigidity of your life. And it is the cycle you find yourself in. And you think to yourself that, oh no, I'm functioning like everyone else. I'm holding the mask on that is 1,000 pounds and really hard for me to carry, but I'm functioning like everyone else. And we lose sight of how small the world around us gets. And we do that to preserve our safety. And you've touched on that quite a bit in this. And those moments where we allow the world to get bigger, when we do the thing that we've always wanted to do, when we experience the life we've always wanted to experience. And there's one of those moments in the bonus chapters. And I love that even later on in their life, you're showing us that we can have those moments. And I think that that's really important. I love the books about like the 21-year-olds who fall in love and everything comes together, but I also love when we're highlighting the real stories that people can see themselves in and remind themselves that, oh, that's possible for me too. I can have those bigger experiences and allow myself to step out of that rigidity that I'm kind of enforcing around myself to preserve myself and take care of myself so I feel safe and secure. And it's like, what a powerful reminder of, oh no, I now feel safe and secure even in the unknown. And that's what this love and these relationships have taught me. So Maggie, I love that that's sort of how we've ended this journey with them.
Thank you. Yeah, you put it way better than I could have. Thank you.
All that PTSD paying off in this interview. So Maggie, I just want to touch briefly on the fact that you're having the most incredible year. 2026 is wild, just from what you've shared on social media. And for people who love you and are so excited for your books, can you just give us a little teaser of what we can expect this year?
Absolutely. So, March 3rd, Fireline is re released in North American bookstores, and that will wrap up the Griffiths. And then in the beginning of June, I will have an indie book release, which will be available in print, ebook, and audio through Amazon and Audible, Kindle Unlimited. And that is called Good Hands. I absolutely love this book. I've wanted to write it for a really long time, and it's what I'm calling gray romance. It's not dark romance, but it's a little bit more gritty and edgy than what I typically do. If you love Fireline, Good Hands is very much the same tone. It is the story of a casino bouncer who falls in love with a woman who is counting cards to try to pay off her brother's debt. Little does she know she is counting cards at a casino owned by the guy who her brother owes money to. So the bouncer gets orders to take her out and eliminate the problem, and he kidnaps her instead. And they go on the run together, fall in love, and try to save themselves, save her brother, and take down the bad guy. Jude is a crispy marshmallow of a hero. He is so, yeah, tough and strong and grumpy on the outside, but he is such a softie on the inside. And Amelia is my very brilliant Ivy League professor who is a statistics professor with an eidetic memory and a lot of sass. And so the two of them just have this explosive relationship. I apologize for the train in the background. They've had this
Nice
explosive
effect. Don't worry
relationship.
about it.
Right. Um, and they just have the best banter. It is such a fun adventure, and I think it's going to be the perfect summer book. And then September 15th, I will have a new book out with Berkeley in the US and Canada and Hodder and Stockton for UK called Blue Jean Summer. It is a cowboy marriage of convenience that will kick off the Wilder series. It is about Hayes Wilder, who is a little bit of a very quiet character. I love a quiet hero. He keeps to himself and he likes his life the way it is, but it gets turned upside down. He has to save the legacy that his grandfather built with this estate, and he needs a wife to do it. So the very bubbly Miss Virginia becomes his wife in the span of about a week. And they have this very fun romance and just bring out the best in each other. And I think readers are really going to love it. It has all of the big found family vibes, and you're just going to fall in love with this whole new cast of characters. And then wrapping up the year in December, I have Smoke Ring, which is another indie release on Amazon, Audible, and KU. That is a childhood best friends to lovers fake engagement. If listeners have read any of my backlist, this is the story of Gio DeRossi and Eloise Lawson. Their parents each have their own books in the Poker Club series. So this is my first second generation book, and it's the only second generation book. I'll just throw that out there. And I'm so excited. It's also my first holiday book, and so it's going to be a fun way to wrap up the year.
So not busy at all, Maggie. We are not going
Not
to
busy at
see or
all.
hear from you. Nothing's going on. Moved, did all these things. That's incredible. And I'm so glad you sort of gave us a rundown of what to expect. And I absolutely cannot wait until you come back and talk about the other books, because I'm ready for more Maggie Gates. And I know everyone listening is. So, Maggie, I just want to
Thank you.
say thank you so much for being here and sharing as much as you did and going as deep as you did into this book. And I really appreciate it. I love this conversation.
Thank you. Likewise. It's always a treat to be able to get to chat.
Well, Maggie, I'm sure as you can tell that I absolutely loved this book. And while I've resonated with all of the stories you've written, I think this one just sort of touched a different place in my heart, where I saw so many of my own experiences in Lennon. And I think that there's a lot of women out there, a lot of readers, a lot of listeners who can see themselves in her, or some part of her personality where she had to be so tough. She had to isolate herself. She had to take care of herself and live in survival mode. And even the good things were really hard to receive. So I wanted to take a moment and say to anyone listening who hears themselves in what I just said, that this book is it's an invitation. It's a welcoming home. You're going to recognize yourself in so many of those things in this character. And it's a reminder that we're allowed to have those journeys. You're allowed to do things awkwardly. You're allowed to struggle opening up or trusting or developing those relationships or feeling confident in the life you're living. And I think I just wanted to take a moment and speak to myself, but also speak to anyone else listening who can relate to that and feels that little sting when we read characters who remind us of chapters of our lives or qualities we see in ourselves. And I just wanted to say that um, this book is an invitation, like I said, a welcoming, but also, a really gentle mirror and sort of a vision for what life looks like when those things do get good and we are resourced and we are safe. And so, Maggie, I sort of want to turn it over to you a little bit and just give you a moment to speak to those readers who do see themselves in Lennon.
Lennon and the whole story of Fireline is a love letter to anyone who has struggled to feel happy after they have been through a really traumatic experience. It is, like you said, an invitation to accept that hard things happen and that beautiful things are still waiting for you. And I believe this story is a love letter to forgiveness, forgiving yourself for anything that you've been through, forgiving others for the way that they have perceived you or that you've perceived them. And it is a look at how hard life can be, but how beautiful it can be afterwards. And that good things are still waiting around the corner.
I think we needed that, Maggie. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at
lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.